Good day, folks. In this one, we're going to be working with the player object so that it'll know when to transition from one state to another. Like we'd set up our animation controller for the player object way back in the day, I think lesson 1 or 2. So in this one, we're going to be creating the sort of triggers and things that will, some of our other scripts will hook into. Anyways, let's go ahead and drag the player object to our hierarchy, all right? And what we're going to be doing is we'll be working with the player sort of animator. The way we're going to do that is we know that this is hooked up to the player controller. So let's go ahead to the controller that it's associated with. So we go to our controllers folder, double click on player. Okay, so we, way back when, created the animations for player chop and player hit. Those are the types of states that we had created. Well, how do we get from these states, from the player idle state where he's just sort of moving, moving and shaking, how do we get to player hit and player chop? Let's go ahead and do that. Let's program that right now. So we're going to go ahead and if you don't have here, you'll click on the parameters button. We're going to create 2 triggers. Okay, so we'll do plus button and then trigger, and we're going to call this player hit and player hurt, or player chop, I'm sorry. Alrighty, and then what we're going to do is with these triggers, we're going to basically have the animation state from player idle to go to player hit and player chop. So we're going to go ahead and right click on player idle, and we're going to say make transition. We're going to see here, we're going to move my mouse to player hit, and then we're going to go ahead and do a right click on player hit and say make transition. So we're going to basically have it so that we're going to configure these pathways from player idle to player hit. So we're going to go ahead and click on the button that's the 2 arrow right there. And we're going to be adjusting some things so that right when we get the trigger for the player getting hit, we're going to have it transition from that player idle. We're not going to give it any time to finish up that player idle animation. We're going to set it so it just is boom, I'm going to change, okay? So let's go ahead and say has exit time. We're going to unclick that, and we're going to go here to settings. And for our, we're going to keep this for, let's take transition duration, set just that to 0, okay? And then what we're going to do is this player hit animation, we're going to go ahead and we're going to set it so that, actually these are fine. We're going to go ahead to the animation out. Okay, so this is going to be the transitioning out of player hit. We're going to set it so that there is an exit time, and we're going to set this to 1. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and go ahead and go back to the as far as go back to this initial thing as far as getting out of player idle, and we're going to add the trigger that we had created as far as the player hit. So right now we're in the transition out of player idle. So see which way that arrow is going. Okay, we're going to go here, set the condition to player hit. Okay, so now what this is going to do is it's going to set it up so that we're going to transition from player idle to player hit when this player hit trigger has been hit. So that's going to be something that we'll configure down the road. I'm going to also go ahead and just check that I got this right as far as the transition out. Let's set this transition duration to 0 as well, because we don't want any sort of time out of it. Fixed duration I think should be okay. So now let's go ahead and do the same thing for player chop. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do a right click on player idle. Let's do make transition, set it to player chop. We can go ahead and, while we're in here, we'll say has exit time, duration set to 0, and then has a condition yes. Instead of player hit, it's going to be player chop. Now we'll go ahead and transition out of player chop by going back to player idle. Yep, that's the right way. And then we're going to go ahead, let's make sure we've got this, has exit time of 1. And then go ahead and set that transition duration to 0. So now we're going to go ahead and test these things. So let's go ahead The easiest way to do that is to basically render the game, which is going to render in this window, and then manually hit these triggers. So let's go ahead with our animator. We're going to drag this down to like where we have our project layer. So we've got kind of our like animation controller down here. And now let's go ahead and render the game. Okay, so it looks like, and I got to change this speed for the player object. So let's make sure, let's click on this little trigger here for player hit. Yep, that's working. And now let's make sure player chop works. Yep. So that trigger, we're basically manually triggering this. We're going to be setting up scripts so that the player gets, does a player chop, like when does it automatically get that? We're not obviously not going to be, clicking. That's not how we play the game. So anyways, this is a good place to stop for now. We're going to be doing some more things with the player's script. So yeah, should be good stuff. I wish you the best of luck. Good stuff.